So welcome to our December 2025 edition of Talent Matters, where we're going to recap what we saw happen in 2025.
You know, in some ways it seemed like this year took forever, but it's hard to believe it's December already. In many ways, it just kind of flew by, and so much has happened as we look back a year.
Yeah, crazy. You think of all the different things that happened in the world, all the things that happened in our country and in business. There's just so much to have impacted us, and we're not going to hit it at all, but we're going to talk about the things that we think impacted leaders throughout the year.
So we are going to keep it to 30 to 40 minutes. Hence, we are not going to go over everything that happened in a single year. But we are going to, the difference between 30 or 40 is going to be dependent upon how many slides we get that excited about and how many questions we have. Speaking of questions, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to make, throw them in the chat. And Tony, the videographer extraordinaire, is going to be manning that as well and letting us know of any questions.
And the slides in the recording will be available, if not this afternoon, then tomorrow. It should be up on YouTube and links sent to your inbox. You'll be able to share it that way too.
And keep in mind for future webcasts, if you aren't available to make it, you can always register and you'll automatically get the recordings and the resources. And we're hoping that they're always either watch friendly or listen friendly. Most of the slides are just for our talking points, kind of like a teleprompter.
Sure.
So you can deal with this as a podcast too, if you like. So
what are we going to do? We're going to talk a little bit about what we saw, what we learned in 2025. There's a lot of different things going on that I think we could leverage and learn from. And there's still a lot of things that are fuzzy out there and unclear, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit about that. And I think 2026 is going to be a crazy year.
yes, hoping so. As I heard somebody say, I think with 2026, you're going to have to make sure that all of the talent on your team comes with batteries included. It is not going to be a sit back and relax. It's going to be time for the Energizer Bunny to kind of take off.
And I think we're already seeing signs of that now. We're going to talk about what happened in 2025, but December 2025, it's a different December than what we've seen in the past. And I think that's going to launch 2026 into a much more rapid growth year than what we had seen in 2025.
For sure.
So a little bit about us, the Metis Group. We got offices here in Charlotte, North Carolina, as well as Detroit. Detroit's where we started almost 30 years ago. Our focus is on hiring, helping organizations get the right people on their team, and then in leadership, growing them, keeping them, getting them in the right spot, and getting most out of their team members.
As everybody always says, you know, it's one thing to get the right people in the right seats, and if you've hired superstars but somehow aren't getting superstar performance, sometimes it comes down to the person in the mirror, because if you hired the superstar, then it's about the leader understanding how to get extraordinary performance out of them without making the person or themselves crazy. So the other thing that we talk about is our Leadership Academy, and that is part of getting more out of the people that we have. Everything from the emotional intelligence journey to leadership essentials. You know, we're asking younger people to do more than we ever have before. So even just moving from being a peer independent contributor to now being a supervisor of the people with whom you were just peers, that requires a lot of emotional intelligence. And then not knowing how to delegate, not knowing how to give people feedback, those are actual techniques that can be learned. And that comes out of that leadership essentials. And then, of course, some of the strategic leadership alignment to make sure that the leadership practices, the whole organization is focused on map to the strategic goals. And of course, we're always trying to help the visionaries find their extraordinary integrator to make life a whole lot easier.
Yeah, all that, and that's going to be really important, I think, in 2026, as these organizations grow and these visionaries are feeling the stress of running their organization and needing to bring on an integrator. I think you're going to see a lot of that activity in 2026. But we're going to talk about 2026 next month. This is about 2025.
That's right. So our highlights, AI, your favorite topic.
Can't talk about 2025 without it.
That's right. Working from home, focusing on results, the haves and the have-nots. And this time we're talking about the businesses who have had a lot of business and those who may have not had so much.
And even within organizations, you see kind of a gap there.
Divisions that have been thriving and others that are holding on for dear life.
We're going to talk a little bit about the sideline influence that happened this year. There were a lot of CEOs that kind of stood off waiting to see what was going to shake out, given all this crazy stuff going on in 2025 that you were going to see engaged in 2026. And then this really interesting dynamic that we see in the workplace this year on turnover, and you'd be surprised what that's all about.
It's not what you think it's going to be,
yes.
for sure.
Yeah. So AI, we got to start there, and there's no shortage of information on how AI is impacting businesses. We're not going to go that deep into it, as much to say that we're being challenged to get more out of our existing resources as a result of applying AI to it. Hitting the entry-level roles a little bit harder than some of the more senior roles because of the way AI is helping in those areas. And probably the biggest obstacle we're experiencing right now is that gap between those who are adopting it and using it for productive purposes and those who are resisting it and not quite sure how to embrace it. You're seeing that play out in organizations. It's not just those senior members and those junior members, but this is a technology that has sprung on us so quickly that those who are slow to embrace technology are having a bigger challenge with AI now than they have with other technologies that have been introduced into the workplace in the past.
Yeah, the other ones were a little bit more simple. They weren't as sophisticated. They didn't require as much of a leap of faith. You know, I could certainly do things faster on a calculator than I could in my mental math. That was easy to figure out. Let's talk first about the entry-level jobs. It is suspected from many different sources that the jobs that were once held by fresh graduates in their first 2 to 3 years out of college can easily be done by AI, which means that if those kids out of college aren't getting those entry-level jobs that they need. So there's a couple of challenges with that. Some of them are staying in school longer. Well, then I'll just go for my master's or my PhD, which in their mind means I should be able to garner more money when I get out. But for businesses, we're thinking, but you got no more experience and more education. I'm not paying for that because I still have to educate you. The challenge is that 2 to 3 years of learning, which isn't just learning a job, but it's learning how to collaborate with people in the workplace. It's learning how to show up on time, to be on time, prepared, and engaged for business meetings, how to contribute to meetings. All of that stuff you learn in your first couple of jobs, they're not learning. So that means if you can use AI for the first 3 or 4 years, and somebody gets out of college in 2022, and now you need to hire them for the next level job when they're 26 or 27, they still are at the 22-year mark of maturity. So you can't just, wave the Sindini magic wand and hope they're going to have 4 years of that learning. The adoption challenges, I think, are also really different because some people will say, well, I use AI, but it's not enough to use AI to say, hey, what was the Michigan State basketball score last night? It's a matter of how do we use it for greater productivity. And I think there are some things, recently we realized we had a serious issue with our business email, and John was able to use AI to say, what have you seen going on? How do I fix this once different things were and to be able to literally cut and copy some of the programming and put it in, or when you were doing the regression analysis for one of our clients.
So what we're finding AI to be is almost a personal assistant. And I thought I heard it best summarized recently when they said, think of AI as that intern you're hiring. Somebody who does what you tell them to do, who needs a lot of guidance, but can come back with some really good stuff. And that's really where I think the play is. This is the first economic cycle where we have seen economic and sales growth without employment growth. And that's largely due to the productivity organizations are getting from AI. Actually, we might be seeing labor shrinkage while this growth is going on, and that's the impact AI is having.
Right, but the key about the adoption is it's not just an alternate search engine. It's to be used to really augment productivity.
Yeah, we'll talk about. Let's look at the next one. So we love this adoption life cycle. I think it's in play more now with AI technology than other technologies we've had in the past because it's come that much faster and it's that much bigger. And that gap at the beginning between the early adopters, or that's the stage we're in right now. We haven't even hit the real impact of it yet, and we're still trying to figure out how it's going to be best adopted. And that chasm right now is creating some tensions within work teams where some are embracing it quicker than others.
This is important for leaders to understand because it really needs to flow in this path. We first need the early innovators, those people who thrive in change, who want to be the first to get whatever the new thing is. And back in the day when AirPods first came out, or when any of the AirPods first came out, those are the people who stood in line for 3 days beforehand to be there when they first came out. Those were those innovators. And it wasn't until they played around with that for a while that the early adopters are like, okay, well, they worked out those bugs. Maybe now I'll go back in and I'll try them too. And then the early majority. There have been, in the late majority, and then the laggards are still people who are working with an abacus at home, right? They're not going to change anything. But those B2C organizations who tried to sell to the early majority first and go for the masses failed miserably because they didn't get the innovators to really test it out, try it out, and start the buzz. So as leaders, as we're trying to get people to adopt the AI productivity impressions, we need to figure out who our innovators are in the organization, get them on board, and get them spreading the word so that the early adopters can take it on. And then that's where you build up some momentum and can really get it going.
Yeah, I think you said it best. This is exactly why we have such a leadership challenge right now. Is the leaders need to help their teams get through that early adoption phase and help bridge that gap between those who are further along than out. EQ comes into play here, training comes into play here, support comes into play here, but this is really challenging our leadership's ability to navigate this change.
And when you have some leaders who are anti-AI, I don't want anybody using it, not for anything, that's stagnating the growth of the entire organization. And then you have others who are thriving. And I think you're going to see a big difference between those organizations who figured out how to leverage it and really take off. We don't want to get into the trends of 2026, and those who have lagged behind.
Right. But the key, the takeaway here is it's stressing our leadership ability to lead our team through this stage of the AI adoption lifecycle. So another thing that we experienced last year and kind of I think we're starting to move past is this whole work from home phenomena. And are we primary from home? Are we primary from the office? Are we hybrid? A lot of that clarity now is starting to settle in. Leaders have understood the value of having team members in the office. Team members have understood the value from working from home and some of the benefits of being in the office. We're starting to get a rhythm and a feel for what works best in this world. It's never going to be a 100% back in office work environment again. There's always going to be some hybrid involved, and it's a matter of navigating the best way for work teams to work like that.
Vistage, which is, of course, a peer-to-peer group for CEOs for small to mid-sized organizations, did a survey a couple of months ago and found that only 7% of all of the Vistage respondents have 100% working remote. That at the very least it's hybrid, and there are, I think, 18% that are all 100% in person. They're realizing that the collaboration, the innovation is very difficult when people are spread out, not to mention the connectivity and the culture. Our team members, because we had some contraction and we moved around a bit, we've always been hybrid. But our team members certainly have been voicing how they miss being together. When we do get together, it's like, gosh, this was great. We really needed to catch up with each other. And it's just a lot easier to support each other when you know what's going on. So the hybrid fine tuning is real. It doesn't work when everybody can pick which days they want to be out of the office, because if there's no overlap between the people you need to collaborate, that's a problem. But I do think for the most part, it's worked out. People have figured out what works best for their organizations, and they needed to just be a little bit more flexible. It's always been a work-life integration since we got laptops. When you stopped having to go into the office to turn on your desktop to do work, it always became more of an integration because you could pop open your laptop once you got home.
Yeah, a couple of other things that we learned that we're trying to navigate through when it comes from working at home. We learned that those leaders who were in the office more during this hybrid transition tended to get promoted more than those who work from home. Whether it was they're more productive, the fact that they were in the office, we know that there were more of them promoted.
Out of sight, out of mind.
The other thing that we realize is the work from home tended to be much more sought out by those with families. And again, that created a little bit of divide within the organization, that if you had younger children, you tended to want to work from home more. You may not have gotten the promotion as a result. We're realizing that there's a lot of give and take there between working from home and those flexibilities and being in the office beyond the collaboration.
I think the other thing that both leaders who have greater personal means and may have dedicated offices at home learned, as did the independent contributors, that working from home was a little bit more of a challenge than when there wasn't a dedicated workspace. So if somebody kind of carved out a corner of the kitchen table that they stacked all their stuff on, and that's where they were at, and tried to keep the kids away from coloring on that side of the table, or you had the dogs or something running in the background. So I think those leaders who thought, sure, work from home is fine because they have their dedicated home office, that's great, but the majority of workers do not. And so it took people time to find space in their homes where they could be productive. And that took some trial and error in trying to figure that out.
So another trend trend that we uncovered in 2025 is there's now a higher focus on results versus in the past we may have tried to make up for some inequities that had accumulated in the workplace and may have made more decisions in trying to balance things out and not as much focus on results. And there's a lot of there's a lot of outside of the workplace influence on this, but we have seen that leaders are more focused on
there was a good positive intention for people to try to give more opportunities and chances to people who may or may not have been prepared. But there was more lawsuit awareness. There was lawsuits coming from people who felt they were discriminated against. There were lawsuits coming from reverse discrimination, people who were not given opportunities and were told, well, we intentionally needed to give an opportunity to somebody who was less qualified, which doesn't make the more qualified person feel any better about it. I think most organizations realize they need to consider everybody from every type of work of life, but bottom line, they got to be qualified to do the job, because if the business isn't making money, you can't hire more people. So the other thing that they find is don't set someone up for failure. Don't put them in a position they're not prepared to be successful in, because then you're not helping their cause at all. Get them the preparation, the development that they need so that when they're promoted into a new role, when they're given an opportunity, they stand a much greater chance of success. So it's a little bit more of a more common sense approach to, we would have never, thrown somebody. Well, they're part of it's desperation too. The unemployment rate has been so low since 2018, other than the artificially turning off the economy in the middle of COVID and turning it back on. But it's been so low, people have just been desperate to hire somebody who's willing to take a chance. But that doesn't help the organization or that person if they're set up for failure. So it is a little bit more common sense as things are settling down a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this continues in 2026. Whether the focus has been adjusted or whether the pendulum might go too far in a different direction. We're not quite sure what to make of it, but we do know that there has been a greater focus on more of a results-based positioning.
Yeah, and that's true. As Americans, we do tend to swing the pendulum from one extreme to the other instead of just kind of bringing it back to the middle or a little bit. So there is some focus on the gains. We actually have a colleague, client, Lucrum Consulting, who does a lot of fractional CFO work, and Jeff Haybrook is the CEO there, and he had a wonderful blog recently where he was talking about how 2025 was a reset, and he really needed to be demonstrating a position of gratitude for some changes that came, whether it was turnover or having an opportunity to take a step back, refine some processes, retool some processes, revisit the type of people they needed moving forward. And while it was in many ways a stressful year for many individuals, it was an opportunity to really get serious about what you need, what's a nice to have, and how to make the most out of the things you have. So the focus on the gains as we reflect back on 2025 is pretty huge.
So another highlight of 2025 that we've not seen before is this, we're calling it the Great Divide, the haves, the have-nots. You got some parts of an organization or some organizations that are overwhelmed with work. For whatever reason, they're in an industry that is exploding, and you got other parts of an organization or other organizations that are struggling and are trying to understand what's going on out there. When you combine them, you look at our GDP. Our GDP as a country is strong, but that's largely driven by those that are doing well at 10%, offsetting those who aren't doing very well, who are actually contracting. When you put it together, we're looking like we're in good shape, but we've got this divide that we've never seen this deep before between those organizations and that are overwhelmed and those are. It could be AI, it could be the economy, whatever it is, has created this this huge gap. It requires more EQ to understand that and be able to recognize that there are others that are in different positions than we are. And there's a lot of uncertainty. Is this half of the organization going to go down? And this half of the organization going to be split off and be its own entity? We just don't know how this is going to play out.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it in so many different industries that, in the past, as John mentioned, we're in business for almost 30 years. So we remember what happened with 9/11. We remember what happened with the 2008 crisis. We remember what happened when somebody didn't like whoever got elected for president. When COVID happened, right? It didn't matter. At one point, there was always certain industries that were still making money. So there's a lot happening in the construction industry and the defense industry after 9/11. When 2008 hit, there was a lot happening with federal contracts. When COVID hit, people were making masks and PPE. There's plenty going on in the medical field. There's always something going on. Now it's kind of like it doesn't make sense. And again, talking to Jeff Haybrook, as a fractional CFO, he's got businesses of all sorts, as do we. And we know of one large HVAC company where the commercial side's doing great, but the residential and the overseas international is suffering tremendously. So do you keep the division that's doing really, really well intact so they can keep thriving and keep the other groups alive? Or do you take a swath straight across, last in, first out, and lay off that way? It's kind of been crazy. We also see, Jeff was telling me, he's got 2 different HVAC companies in the same Charlotte area, in the same industries. One is thriving and the other can't find a new piece of business to save his life. We've seen orthodontists, marketing companies, search firms on both sides. It makes no sense, and nobody can figure out exactly what's going on. So there has been a lot of uncertainty this year, as John mentioned in the third bullet point, including, are we going to wars or not? Are we making nuclear missiles or not? We're
going to get that in a second. The challenge leaders have on this great divide, we're calling it, is if within the same organization you have certain departments or certain groups that are overworked because they're in a particular part of the business that is doing well, and you've got another set of workers within the same organization who are twiddling their thumbs looking
Playing
for
solitaire,
things to do. How do you manage that? Obviously, you look to do some cross-training or you look to do some work share, but it's not that easy to do quickly. So it requires a lot of EQ to understand the stresses those that are overworked are doing, as well as the stresses of those that are underworked, not sure what's going to be happening to them. It's a really crazy leadership challenge dealing with that overworked, underworked divide.
Mm-hmm. So there's so much uncertainty that's driving us to the sidelines. And I keep telling people that, running a business is not a spectator sport. So standing on the sidelines doesn't really work very well. But we've got the Washington, D.C. policies, global instability all over the place. I mean, every time you turn around, somebody else is getting cranky about something, and that just makes people nervous. As John mentioned, AI is having such a significant impact on everything we do. That it's creating uncertainty, and some people kind of want to see, standing on the sidelines, how it's going to play out before they jump in and try.
Yeah, we've never seen this type of just wait and see approach that leaders have, whether it's around the tariffs or whether it's around technology or whether it's around some sort of global influence or what other curveballs may be coming out of Washington. What has happened in 2025 is a lot of leaders have just stepped back and tried to make sense out of it all. And we expect that this is not going to last much longer. We mentioned earlier, we're already starting to feel that in December now, where people are jumping back in. They're accepting the technology as productivity partners. They're assuming this tariff thing is going to kind of work its way out. They're assuming this great divide between the haves and have-nots is going to get closed up. They're assuming some of this cross-training of their team is going to happen. We're already starting to see people coming in off the sidelines, but we've never seen them sit back on the sidelines as much as they did in 2025.
Not this long. We've seen it in all those other significant time frames that I talked about for 3 or 4 months, but this has really been going on since January. It's been kind of nuts. One of the reasons we don't think it's going to last that long, let's face it, at least we're hearing and feeling that the government hears us now. So while they're creating a lot of the uncertainty, the fact that we have 3 drops in the Fed by the Fed on the interest rate is pretty significant in 1 quarter.
Right.
That was pretty significant. It says they hear us, they're trying to figure it out too, but at least they're not saying, figure it out on your own. The other thing I'm hearing, there were a lot of people this summer that wanted to talk about bringing on an integrator, and they were excited about it, but then they kept kicking that can down the road. And the phone's ringing again in December. They know they want to bring this person on in the first quarter. So what do we have to do now in order to prepare for that? And I think that makes a big difference. So you can feel all right, they're anxious. It's kind of like the team coming out of the tunnel and they're ready to take the field. It's like, just play the fight song so I can get out there. They're tired of just sitting in the stands and watching.
Right. So this next one was one that is really strange, and I don't know that there's ever been a business cycle where there hasn't been enough turnover to support what normal business activity
Voluntary turnover.
But so we all remember the Great Resignation. That was 2-3 years ago, where you couldn't hold on to people. They were switching jobs every other month. It felt like many team members had multiple jobs.
Job stacking, yes.
There was job stacking. What organizations have come to rely on is a natural turnover that occurs within their organization, where the questionables or the B and C players are unhappy and you eventually move on to other roles that they can flourish in, which allows an organization to bring on new talent and continue to make their organization stronger. What's happening now is these B and C players aren't moving on like they have in other business cycles. They're sticking within an organization. So an organization's choices are to try and deal with them or develop these underperformers or move them out on their own. And that's a difficult decision for leaders to make, is to terminate a questionable, where in the past these people would have left on their own. It's creating quite a leadership challenge now in having to deal with a set of underperformers that we haven't had to deal with before.
So when you think of the millennials and the Gen Zs, in their work time, they've really not known a time where they couldn't just go get another job whenever they wanted it. And suddenly, because of all the uncertainty that these business leaders are feeling, they're not doing a lot of new hiring, they're holding on, trying to do more with less. And so if you quit a job, there isn't necessarily another one you can go pick up at the drop of the hat. And so it is making, especially your B and C players, a lot more reluctant to leave. Your A players can always find a new job when they want to. So it is a little bit of a difference. And it is requiring that leaders demonstrate some more emotional intelligence and give people some feedback in a constructive, in a kind and compassionate way to help them grow or help them make other chances, because nobody wants to go to work feeling like they're subpar.
Yeah, I think the other challenge here is this is the first time leaders have had to terminate people more than what they have had to in the past. And that skill or that approach isn't something that a lot of leaders have had to become proficient in.
Especially if they're under 40.
Yeah, so in the past we've just waited for those people to leave, they've left, and we were able to rebuild an organization. That's not happening. It certainly didn't happen last year.
Right.
So these were the 6 highlights that we recognized last year that we wanted to talk about. It's really been a unique year, from AI to the work situations, how we've switched a little bit more to focus on results. This huge divide between those people that are successful and overworked and those that are not. This really strange paralysis organizations or leaders have felt, where they just want to sit back and see what we're going to happen, and then this really bizarre turnover situation that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So we had a couple of questions. First of all, if you want to download this really cool development guide for critical thinking, go ahead and scan that, and it'll take you to a form where you can just fill out and get the development report for Watson Glacier is the critical thinking instrument we use. A phenomenal resource for developing critical thinking.
It is really cool. It's not something that you can game. It's also not something for which you can find the answers directly on the internet. You can, if you want to invest 2 to 3 hours of prep time, figure out how to prepare yourself and think more critically before you take the instrument, but you're not going to find the answers. So it's really an insightful tool, both for development as well as for hiring.
Right. So one question that came through, actually we had a couple. One is, so how does a leader, when they recognize they have somebody who needs to be coached out of an organization, they need to be fired, how do they want to best go about that today?
So for those of you who've been around us at all, you know we talk a lot about our job scorecard. For those of you for whom this is brand new, go to our website, type in the search bar, job scorecard. You'll have an opportunity to see a sample and check things out. The job scorecard and the subsequent performance acceleration tracker allows the supervisor and their direct report to be on the exact same page with what's expected in the job, and gives them an opportunity at least once a quarter to go through item by item on the success factors to decide if they're on track or off track. When someone's job is at risk, we strongly encourage the leader to be going over it with the person at least once a month. And so there are green, yellow, and red marks by every success factor. Because the success factors are set up for a minimum required in order to keep your job, they should mostly be green, if not all of them. On occasion, if you start getting a group of yellows and you start reviewing this every month, nobody wants to have the same conversation with you over and over again, month after month, that they are not meeting expectations and they have no clue what to do differently. At that point, they will find a new job for themselves. We have freed them up to find success elsewhere, because nobody really wants to go to work feeling like a failure.
Right. I think the bottom line is, since a lot of these leaders have not had to fire as much as they need to now, it comes down to that feedback. It comes down to having some sort of scorecard that they can use to rely on. A termination should never be a surprise to either the direct report or the leader, and that's really what needs to be emphasized.
And it can still be done with compassion, even if somebody hasn't, and then you're like, look, this isn't working out for you. We want you to feel like you're successful. How do we work through a transition together? It doesn't have to be, you're toast and here's a box, go fill up your stuff from your desk and we'll see you later. That was the old days.
And we had another question in here, and this was around Gen Zs in the workplace. And I struggled with whether or not we wanted this to be a trend that we were going to talk about. I'm not sure it really is a trend, but there is something unique about the Gen Zs in the workplace. It's nothing good or bad. Remember 10, 15 years ago, the millennials were the bad guys. And before that, it was us. And before that, there's always been a generation in the workplace that people are trying to figure out. It happens to be the Gen Zs right now. But I don't know that is a particular trend. It's just another part of the generation cycle that we've been going through.
What makes them so unique? In your mind, a couple of highlights.
Well, first of all, their comfort with technology. Gen Z today has never spent a day of their life without a smartphone. So their ability to just accept AI or accept the technology is so natural to them. That is a really cool thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember walking into an antique store and there was a Gen Y, a millennial, standing next to me looking at a rotary phone and just trying to figure out how that could possibly work because they never had to just dial and hear all the clicks for 9 and all the clicks for 3 and so on. So
it definitely is a different dynamic. I thought I heard a funny story the other day. The best thing about the Gen Zs being in the workplace today is the millennials are no longer the bad guys.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
But anyway, that's a 2025 evolution review.
So for 2026, join us January 20th for the trends we see coming up in 2026, and we think it's going to be really exciting. I think a lot of organizations have retooled. I think the spectator sport approach to business is going to be behind us. I think we're going to hit the ground running come 2026, and that'll be fun to talk about some of those trends. In February, we're going to be talking about succession planning, which is not an onerous thing. Do not be afraid of that one. When I speak on succession planning a lot, people are a little intimidated with that concept. It's really not as hard as you might think it is. And then, that one's going to be March 18th instead of March 19th. But it is a little different because it's going to be on a Wednesday, and we'll talk about accountability. So you can sign up for any of the webcasts on this QR code. If you like, we'll leave that up for a little bit.
Yeah, that'll take you to our signups page, and you can get on any of these webcast lists. The good thing is, once you've signed up, you're going to get a copy of the materials. You're going to get the recording and be able to share it easily that way. But there's a lot of cool things going on next year, and I'm looking forward to talking about the things that are going to evolve, and we get to put on bring out our crystal ball next month and see what we're going to expect.
Yep. So thanks for joining us. It's wonderful that you're here. Feel free to share this with others because the recording will be available to you, and it'll also be hosted on our website for anybody else who'd like to find it. Yep. Have a great holiday season. Make it be safe and a lot of celebration.
See you next month.